Good evening from David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium in lovely Lawrence, Kansas. I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski from the 580 Sports Talk crew. The booth tonight, the site of a blowout win for the Kansas Jayhawks, who are now 5-1 on the season and made their first ever game against the UCF Knights, a memorable one, blowing out Gus Malzahn's group by a margin of 51-22, the first 50-point game of the season for Lance Leipold's Jayhawks and the fifth of the Lance Leipold era here at KU. And this game was a rout from the very beginning. UCF started the game with the ball, moved it pretty well. In fact, they were moving with very little resistance from the KU defense, getting well into KU territory to about the 30-yard line. That's when UCF quarterback John Rice Plumlee actually had to leave the game. He's missed the last 3 weeks, had to leave on the first drive of the game. Their backup Timmy McClain came in. That threw off the entire rhythm for the UCF offense. And from that point on, it was all Jayhawks. KU scored on its first 3 possessions of the game after, by the way, UCF punted from the Kansas 36-yard line on the first possession of the game, which was a bizarre choice in the first place for UCF. But after KU got the ball, it would score on its next 3 possessions to open the contest. Field goal, touchdown, touchdown in that order offensively, and tack on an 82-yard punt return touchdown as well from junior Trevor Wilson. That was the first punt return touchdown almost in 9 years to the day for Kansas. Yes, I have to go all the way back to a Nick Harwell punt return touchdown in a 33-14 loss on October 4th of 2014 for the last KU punt return touchdown. That sent us to the break at 24-0, and KU was only able to compound it after that. How about a 75-yard touchdown run by Devin Neal on the first play of the second half? Lance Leipold talked to us during postgame just a little while ago about how KU talks constantly about getting out to good leads, but then keeping the pedal to the metal and making things happen early in the second half as well. Well, it's hard to beat 75 yards and a touchdown on the first play from scrimmage coming out of the break. Overall, it was an incredible game for KU on both sides of the ball, but we will start tonight with the run game for the Jayhawks. 399 yards on the ground. That's the most KU has had in a game since 2018 in their blowout win 55-14 over Rutgers. In that game, KU had 1 more yard on the ground than they had today. That was 400 yards in that game on the ground tonight, 399. And a fitting 399 as well for KU because of the 2 players who were inducted into the program Ring of Honor tonight. One of them, Tuxedo Tony Sands, who, of course, as we all remember, back in the early 90s, mid-90s, against Missouri, put up what was then an NCAA record, 396 yards in a single game. He actually met with KU after the game in the team locker room and talked about the performance, and Lance Leipold said, hey, well, look, we had to have 3 guys do that performance that you did with just one single guy back in the mid-90s. But Tony did give a thumbs up to the team, said he was a big fan of the rushing performance tonight. And with just 3 running backs carrying the ball, 5 players total to the ball in this game, throw in a 10-yard rush for Lawrence Arnold and a couple of runs as well for quarterback Jason Bean, who we'll touch on again in a minute. But you had just Devin Neal, Daniel Highshaw, and Dylan McDuffie. The 3 of them. Nobody had more than 19 carries from that group, and they each had at least 90 yards in the game. I'll run you through them real quick. Devin Neal, superstar, future NFL player, maybe the best player on this entire KU roster. He had pretty easy 12 carries for 154 yards in the game. Of course, that 75-yarder, the biggest of the group, also tacked on a touchdown. Nearly 13 yards per carry for Devin Neal in this contest. He is having such a fantastic start in All-America potential first half of this season, certainly in All Big 12 first half of this season. Daniel Highshaw got more carries than anybody for the Jayhawks, 19 of them in the game. He had 134 yards and 2 touchdowns, over 7 yards per carry. And Dylan McDuffie, the Buffalo transfer, who has really picked up more and more of a workload in recent weeks, which is huge for this team to keep Highshaw fresh, to keep Neal fresh. When you have a legitimate third running back option like McDuffie, who in this game had 13 carries for 91 yards and another 2 touchdowns for himself, that just makes things so much easier for this offense. And while we're talking about the running game, we have to give some credit to the Kansas offensive line as well. They kept being clean in the passing game, which they didn't have to do all that often in this game, throughout the afternoon, and they were opening up big hole after big hole, getting push after push against the UCF defensive line throughout the afternoon. And that group, which Leipold made sure to point out, has been banged up recently, including center Mike Nowitzki barely practicing all week. They had a huge night tonight against the UCF Knights. Now let's get to Jason Bean here, who started for the second week in a row. Jalen Daniels still out with that back injury. In fact, he wasn't even on the sideline in this game for KU. He was in the building, but they had him watching from inside. They were a little bit worried, the program was, about what if there's a sudden movement? What if someone collides with him on the sideline? Didn't want to take any risks as he continues to recover from that back injury that has given him problems throughout the season. So Jason Bean gets the call again for the second week in a row. We remember last week on the road in Austin against Texas. Tough game for Jason Bean, but it was a tough tough game for everybody. And Bean didn't even know until 45 minutes before kickoff that he was going to start the game for the Jayhawks. This week, he got an entire week of practice, full practice every single day, running with the ones, and he came out and played really well in this contest. Leipold complimented him post-game for the things that he was doing that wouldn't show up on the stat sheet. Leadership, the intangible things. Statistically, not a huge day for him, just a couple of yards rushing on the ground. He went 8 of 12 passing for 91 yards in the game. KU put up 51 points in this game with just 91 yards passing, which is somewhat remarkable for college football in the year 2023, but he was efficient when throwing it, handed the ball off well, didn't fumble it, none of those things, and he did exactly what KU asked him to do, and it ends up working out pretty darn well for the KU offense. Now, we should also mention the KU defensive effort in this game. UCF put up 22 points. All of those came in garbage time. We effectively had garbage time midway through the third quarter. KU got out to that 24-0 lead at the half, as I mentioned. One play into the third quarter, they extended it to 31-0. It was really nowhere close after that. UCF got a couple of lucky breaks. They missed on their own two-point conversion, then returned a fumbled snap on a KU extra point for another 2 points going the other way. But again, a lot of their points came with KU not exactly playing their full strength offensively. Had a couple of guys who got banged up throughout the game. Jeremy Robinson had to leave late. He walked off the field after being down for a little bit. Hayden Hatcher suffered what appeared to be an arm or a shoulder injury at some point in the second half. KU not exactly going full strength throughout a lot of the second half, but hey, when you're up 31-0, 12 seconds into the third period, you really don't need to go full bore in that direction. By the way, we should note for UCF in this contest, John Rice Plumlee, who I mentioned started the game, wasn't able to play much. He goes just 3 of 7 passing for 33 yards, and he has missed the last 3 weeks due to a leg issue. He was barely able to play after that first drive. Their backup, Timmy McClain, came in, played most of the game, and did a decent job, 136 yards through the air, had a couple of touchdown passes, but was also sacked 4 times by the Kansas defense. KU outgained UCF in this game 490-371, and again, most of that yardage coming in garbage time for the Knights. And if we're going to shout out anybody on the defensive side of the ball, and there were plenty who had good games in this one, I want to give a shout out to Austin Booker, the Minnesota transfer at defensive end, who has continued to play his best football more and more as Big 12 season has continued. It really started with that Illinois game in non-conference play. He has only been better and better, had a sack forced fumble in this contest here on Saturday afternoon in Lawrence. He has been a massive addition for this KU defense. And really, great defensive game. Special teams was phenomenal, and the offense, specifically the ground attack, was great in a KU 51-22 win over the UCF Knights in the first ever meeting between these two new Big 12 foes. With that, KU is now 5-1. The Jayhawks need just one more win in their final 6 games to reach bowl eligibility for the second year in a row. And if KU can win 2 more games this year, that would give them their first winning season since 2008. Of course, that 8-5 team then ended up winning the Insight Bowl over, coincidentally enough, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So KU still with a lot of goals ahead of them. They will go to Stillwater back on the road next weekend as they take on the Oklahoma State Cowboys. That'll be a 2:30 kickoff coming up next week in Oklahoma. But before we get there, it's time to wrap things up from David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium, where again, the Kansas Jayhawks knock off the UCF Knights 51-22 to improve to 5-1 overall on the season and 2-1 in Big 12 play. We'll recap this game and so much more coming up Monday on 580 Sports Talk. We'll break this contest down. We'll talk about K-State's unfortunate loss to Oklahoma State on Friday night. And of course, we'll get to a recap of Chiefs-Vikings coming up on Monday as well. That's Monday from 2 until 6 on the 580 Sports Talk YouTube channel and 580 WIBW AM in Topeka and across Northeast Kansas. Until then, I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski saying so long from Lawrence and so long from